My husband and his entire family left for a destination wedding in the Bahamas 3 days after my accident, while I was still in a hospital bed waiting on surgical results. They said the resort deposits were non-refundable. What they didn't know was that his grandmother had been sitting in that room, absorbing every excuse, every text message, and every choice they made. And 5 months later, she made sure everyone in the family understood exactly what she had witnessed. Before we get into it, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing all the different places you all tune in from. And if this is your first time here, hit subscribe so you don't miss stories like this one. My name is Shayla Briggs, and until that week, I still believed that the people I had married into were my family too. I had been in a rear-end collision on the highway coming home from work. A driver behind me didn't brake in time, and the impact sent my car spinning into the median. I remember the airbags deploying, the smell of something burning, and then just noise. A lot of noise, all at once. I was conscious but couldn't move well. By the time the paramedics arrived, my abdomen was already swelling. They took me in by ambulance, and after several hours in the ER, doctors told me I had a lacerated spleen and possible internal bleeding. They needed to monitor me closely and would likely need to operate the following day. It was serious. It was not optional, and I was more frightened than I had ever been in my life. My husband came to the hospital that first night. He sat with me for a few hours, held my hand, and told me everything was going to be okay. I believed him. What I didn't think about until later was that the entire time he was sitting beside me, he was also checking his phone. His younger brother's destination wedding was 10 days away. The whole family, my husband, his mother, his father, his sister, and several cousins, had booked a 4-night stay at an all-inclusive resort in Nassau. They had been planning it for nearly a year. His brother and his fiancée had always dreamed of a beach wedding, and no one in the family had hesitated to put down their deposits and book flights. It was supposed to be one of the biggest celebrations the family had ever had. 2 days after my accident, when doctors confirmed I would need laparoscopic surgery to address the bleeding, I asked my husband if the family could cancel or at least postpone. My voice was steady even though I felt anything but. I explained what the doctors had told me. I reminded him that I would be alone during recovery. My own parents lived in Ohio and couldn't make it down on short notice, and most of my close friends had their own work and children to manage. He didn't say no right away. He went quiet, which I took to mean he was actually thinking it through. Then he told me the resort had a strict cancellation policy, and they were well past the refund window. He told me his brother had been planning this for over a year. He said it was only 4 nights, and he would have his phone on him the entire time. I asked if at least his mother might stay back with me while the others went. His mother called me herself that evening. She was sympathetic in the way people are when they have already made up their mind. She said she understood how frightening this must be. She said she would be praying for me. Then she mentioned, gently but with finality, that his sister had already bought a dress for the trip and was really looking forward to it. And then she said she was sure I would be just fine. I lay in that hospital bed for a long time after I put the phone down. The morning the family left for the airport, my husband stopped by the hospital first. He brought me a smoothie from the place I liked and a magazine he had picked up at the gift shop downstairs. He kissed my forehead. He told me the nurses would take good care of me and that he would text as soon as they landed. His eyes didn't quite meet mine when he said it. I watched him walk out the door and felt something inside me go very quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't go away. About 40 minutes later, a woman walked into my room carrying a small canvas tote bag and a Ziploc of homemade oatmeal raisin cookies. She was in her late 70s, small and upright, with white hair pinned neatly behind her ears. She wore a pressed floral blouse and sensible shoes, and she moved with the unhurried certainty of someone who knew exactly why she was there. She was my husband's paternal grandmother, and she had driven up from Savannah, Georgia, the night before, after one of her grandsons had called to tell her what was happening. She set her bag down on the chair beside my bed, looked at me for a moment, and said, "Well, I'm here now." Her name was Nana Bet, and she had raised 3 children largely on her own after her husband passed in his early 60s. She was not a woman who made loud declarations. She didn't say anything more about who had left or why she had come instead. She simply pulled the chair close to my bedside, took a crossword puzzle book out of her bag, and made herself comfortable in a way that made clear she had no intention of going anywhere. And she didn't. I went into surgery the following morning. She held my hand as the orderlies prepared to wheel me back. I watched the hallway lights blur past overhead. Somewhere over the Atlantic, my husband was probably watching a movie and eating the warm mixed nuts they bring out in business class. Then the anesthesia came, and I didn't think about anything else. When I woke up in the recovery room, the first face I saw was hers. She was dozing in the chair beside my bed, her head tilted back slightly, the crossword book open across her lap. A cup of tea she had never touched sat on the tray table beside her. She had clearly not left the hospital, not even once. The relief hit me first, and then, underneath it, something heavier and harder to name. The days that followed were the most physically difficult of my life. My body hurt in ways I hadn't known were possible. Sitting up required help. Walking to the bathroom felt like completing an obstacle course. The surgical team was cautiously optimistic, but they were honest that recovery from this kind of procedure takes real time, and that pushing too hard too fast would set me back. Nana Bet was there for all of it. She helped me adjust my position when I couldn't get comfortable. She refilled my water cup. She asked the nurses the questions I was too foggy to remember. She talked to me about ordinary things when the silence got too heavy. Her vegetable garden back home, a church fundraiser she'd been helping plan, a neighbor's dog that kept getting into her tomatoes. Meanwhile, the texts from Nassau were arriving in small, cheerful, and completely insufficient waves. My husband sent a photo of the ocean from the balcony of their room the first morning. "So beautiful here, babe. Thinking of you. Hope today goes okay." I stared at that message for longer than made sense. His mother sent a string of hearts and a praying hands emoji. His sister sent me a photo of herself in a pale blue dress on the beach with the caption, "Wish you were here," and 4 flower emojis after it. I read it twice and turned my phone face down on the blanket. Not one of them asked what the surgeon had found. Not one of them asked how much pain I was in, or what the physical therapy evaluation had shown. Not one of them asked if I was scared. The messages were warm in their surface texture and hollow all the way through. I was beginning to understand, slowly and against my will, that checking in and genuinely caring are 2 entirely different things. Nana Bet noticed. I could see it in the way her expression shifted when I read a message and set my phone aside without responding. She never asked who had texted or what they'd said. She only watched, and gradually I began noticing something else. She was doing more than watching. Every so often, when she thought I wasn't paying attention, she would open her own phone and type something. A few times I saw her photograph a piece of hospital paperwork sitting on my tray table. When I asked her what she was doing, she said she was just keeping track of things. I didn't press her on it. By the time my husband and his family got home from Nassau, I had been discharged and was recovering at our house, still using a walker to get around. I had a growing stack of medical bills on the kitchen counter, several follow-up appointments scheduled, and a set of physical therapy exercises I was supposed to do twice a day. I had managed all of it on my own, with Nana Bet driving up from Savannah one more time to take me to my first post-surgical follow-up and help me get through the paperwork. They arrived back on a Tuesday. His sister came to the house first, still buzzing from the trip. She dropped her suitcase in the hallway and spent the next 20 minutes showing me photos on her phone, the ceremony on the beach, the reception dinner, the sunset cruise on the second night. My husband came in behind her and hugged me carefully, aware of where I was still sore. His mother called from the driveway to say she was exhausted from travel and would check in with me later in the week. Not one of them asked what the surgeon's final report had said. Not one of them asked whether the physical therapy was going well. Not one of them asked how hard it had been to handle everything alone. But his sister did mention twice that the resort had the best piña colada she'd ever had. I sat on the couch and said the appropriate things, and somewhere in the middle of it all, I stopped expecting anything different. A week later, when I tried to talk to my husband honestly about how alone I had felt, he ended the conversation before I had finished my second sentence. He said I was being unfair to him. He said the wedding had been planned long before my accident, and no one could have predicted this would happen. He said I was acting like the family didn't care about me at all, which wasn't true. He used the word dramatic, and though he seemed to realize how it landed, he didn't walk it back. Nana Bet was in the kitchen when that conversation happened. She didn't interrupt, didn't come into the room. But when my husband went upstairs, she came and sat beside me on the couch. She didn't say much. She placed her hand over mine and said quietly, "I heard that." 2 words, but the way she said them made me feel less alone than I had felt in weeks. After she went back to Savannah, I started seeing things I'd spent years explaining away. When my husband's sister had gone through her divorce a few years earlier, the whole family had mobilized instantly. My husband flew out to help her move. His parents went to stay with her for 2 weeks. Family dinners and holidays shifted around her schedule for months afterward. I had thought, at the time, that it was one of the most beautiful things I had ever seen. A family showing up fully for one of their own. What I understood now was that I had never quite been counted as one of their own. My birthday dinners had been rescheduled twice in the past 4 years because of events in his sister's life. An opportunity I'd been offered, a position that would have meant relocating temporarily, had been shut down in a single conversation because it was understood without being said outright that moving farther from his family wasn't something that was going to happen. When I'd had a health scare 2 years before, a biopsy that had taken 10 days to come back clear, his mother had expressed concern in the same tone she might use for a weather forecast and moved on. I had told myself each time that I was reading too much into things, that I was too sensitive, that I needed to adjust my expectations. The accident had made it impossible to keep telling myself that. Nana Bet called every few weeks from Savannah. She asked specific questions, how the therapy was progressing, what the imaging follow-up had shown, whether the insurance company was giving me trouble with the claim. She was the only person in that entire family who knew what my out-of-pocket costs had come to, because she was the only person who had thought to ask. She also asked whether my husband and I had talked any more about what happened. I was honest with her. I told her that every time I raised it, I ended up being cast as the problem. She listened without interrupting. After one of those calls, she said something I kept coming back to for weeks afterward. The truth doesn't need you to fight for it, she said. It just needs the right moment. I thought she was offering comfort. I had no idea she had been spending months preparing for exactly that moment. 4 months after my accident, my husband's sister announced she was expecting her first baby. The family's excitement was immediate and total. His mother began planning a shower within the week, a big one catered, at the country club the family had belonged to for years. More than 60 people were invited. There was going to be a mimosa bar, a custom flower wall, personalized cookies with the baby's initials. His sister had always gotten the most celebrated version of every milestone, and this would be no different. I was asked to help with the planning. I said yes. Nana Bet called when she heard about the shower. Her voice was calm, but something in it felt different, purposeful in a way I hadn't heard before. She said she was driving up for it. She said she wouldn't miss it. And then she said something that made me stop. I need you to be there, she said. Not I hope to see you there, or I'd love for you to come. I need you there. Whatever happens, I want you close by. I asked what she meant. She said, just be present, that's all, you'll understand. The feeling I'd had in the weeks after my surgery, that something was building slowly and inevitably toward a breaking point, returned with more weight than before. The shower was on a Saturday afternoon in late October. The country club was warm and soft-lit, with white rose centerpieces and a hand-lettered sign above the entrance. His sister sat at the head of the long table in a sage green dress, radiant and laughing, receiving gifts and compliments with the ease of someone accustomed to being celebrated. His mother moved through the room, greeting guests, with the practiced warmth of a woman who had spent decades managing the family's public image. I sat near Nana Bet. She had dressed carefully for the occasion, a deep burgundy blouse, her good pearl earrings, her silver hair pinned back with unusual precision. She ate quietly and watched the room. Her purse sat on the chair beside her rather than on the floor, and it was slightly open. I noticed, but said nothing. About 45 minutes in, after the mimosas had been poured, and the first round of appetizers cleared, Nana Bet pushed her chair back and stood. The table nearest her quieted first, then the rest of the room followed. His mother looked over and smiled, assuming this was the toast portion of the afternoon. She gestured to someone to pass a champagne flute toward Nana Bet. His father sat up a little straighter in his chair. His sister smiled warmly from her seat at the head of the table. Nana Bet thanked everyone for being there. She said she was grateful to see the family together, grateful for the new life coming into the world, grateful for every person in that room who had shown up today. And then she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded stack of papers. The warmth in the room didn't vanish all at once. It left the way heat leaves a room in winter, gradually from the edges in. First from his mother's face, then from my husband's, then from the people who were paying close enough attention to understand that something had shifted. She unfolded the papers slowly, without rushing. She said that before they could celebrate this family, she wanted to speak honestly, because honesty was something she had always believed families owed each other. Then she began to read. She read the date of my accident, she read the date of my surgery, she read the date my husband and the rest of the family departed for Nassau. She read text messages aloud, the ocean view photo, the prayer emoji, the wish you were here, with the flower emojis, and she read them alongside the exact dates and times they had been sent, so that everyone in the room could place them correctly against the surgical timeline. She read without commentary and without emotion, just the words and the dates, one after another. The room had gone completely silent. She read the date of my first post-surgical follow-up appointment, and noted that no one from the immediate family had attended it. She read the total out-of-pocket medical expenses I had been managing since the accident, number she had been the only person in the family to ask about. She noted that in the 5 months since my accident, not one member of the immediate family had asked what those numbers were. His sister's expression had gone very still. His mother's face had moved from surprise to something more complicated. My husband was staring at the tablecloth. Nana wasn't finished. She talked about patterns. She talked about his sister's divorce years earlier, the flights booked, the 2-week parental stay, the holidays rearranged, and she set those facts beside what had happened when I was in surgery, without drawing a conclusion for anyone. She mentioned my birthday dinners that had been quietly moved. She mentioned the job I had set aside without being asked to. She spoke without raising her voice, and without calling anyone a bad person. She simply said that there was a meaningful difference between the family that appeared in photographs and the family that stayed through the night in an uncomfortable chair in a hospital room. She said she knew which version she had seen with her own eyes. Then she folded her papers, placed them back in her purse, and sat down. No one spoke for a long moment. His father said this wasn't the time or the place. His mother said Nana had only heard one side of things. My husband said it was more complicated than it sounded. But the room was already shifting. An aunt seated across from me asked, gently but directly, why no one had come home early when the surgery happened. A cousin who had known me for years said she had wondered about some of this herself. An older woman I barely knew leaned toward his mother and said, in a low voice that carried anyway, I remember what you said when she had that biopsy 2 years ago. That didn't sit right with me either. One by one, without drama and without anyone raising their voice, the version of the family his parents had spent years presenting began to look different in that room. Not because anyone had attacked them, because the truth, given enough space and enough witnesses, had simply become visible. I didn't say anything during any of it. I didn't need to. Nana had already said it, and she had said it with more care and more precision than I ever could have managed, without anger, without any desire for spectacle, with nothing except the quiet, patient record of what had actually happened. I watched his sister through most of it. She sat very still, hands folded on the table, looking at a spot somewhere in front of her. She didn't defend what had happened. That was the thing I kept coming back to afterward. She didn't defend it. After the shower ended and guests began gathering their coats and making their way out, Nana found me near the exit. She put her arm through mine and walked with me out to the parking lot without saying much. The afternoon light was low and gold across the pavement, the air carrying the beginning of fall. You okay? She asked. I told her I thought so. I told her I hadn't expected any of that. She nodded slowly. I know. But some things need to happen in front of witnesses. Because when things stay in the dark long enough, people start to believe they never happened at all. I thought about all the times I had questioned my own perception. All the years I had decided I was being too sensitive, asking for too much, misreading what was in front of me. All the times I had made peace with something that hadn't deserved to be made peace with. The months after the shower changed things in ways I'm still sorting through. My husband and I started going to couples counseling, not because the path forward suddenly became obvious, but because for the first time I was saying what I actually needed instead of adjusting myself around what the family was willing to give. Progress is slow. Some sessions feel real and some don't. His mother hasn't looked at me quite the same way since that afternoon. I've stopped trying to figure out whether that's guilt or something else, and I've stopped trying to manage it either way. His sister sent me a text a few weeks after the shower. It said only that she was sorry. No context, no explanation. Just those 2 words. I read it several times and then saved it, because there was something in its smallness that felt more honest than almost anything she had ever said to me before. And Nana Bet went back to Savannah. She calls every week now. We talk about her tomato garden and the church fundraiser and the neighbor's dog, and sometimes we talk about harder things too. She never brings up the shower unless I do. She doesn't seem to need to revisit it. She did what she came to do, and that appears to be enough for her. A few months after everything, I drove down to Savannah to see her. We sat on her back porch as the sun dropped behind the tree line, the air cooling into real fall. She had sweet tea in mason jars and a bowl of pecans she'd shelled herself. We talked about things she wanted to plant in the spring, and a book she was in the middle of, and a trip she'd been considering to see an old friend in Raleigh. At some point I looked at her, this woman who had driven hours without being asked, who had slept in an uncomfortable hospital chair, who had walked into a catered baby shower, with a stack of printed papers in her purse, and spoken the truth to 60 people who had been comfortable not hearing it. And I felt something I didn't have a precise name for. Gratitude was part of it, but it was more than that. I had spent years trying to earn my place inside a version of family that kept rearranging itself, so I was always a half step outside the center of it. I had adjusted myself, set things aside, swallowed things I should have said, and told myself that if I was patient enough and accommodating enough, eventually they would treat me the way I deserved. And then one woman drove up from Georgia with a tote bag and a Ziploc of oatmeal cookies, and sat beside my hospital bed without anyone asking her to, and I finally understood something I had needed to understand for a long time. Family is not the people who share a last name with you. It is not the people who appear in the group photos, or remember to send something on the right holidays. Family is the person who is already there when you open your eyes in the recovery room, the person who drives you to the follow-up appointment, and knows exactly which questions to ask, because they were paying attention when no one else was. The person who stands up in a room full of people and speaks the truth at personal cost, because they have decided you are worth that cost. I had one person in that family who fit that description. She was sitting across from me on a porch in Savannah, drinking sweet tea and listening to the crickets starting up in the yard. That was enough. It was more than enough. It was the only thing that had ever mattered.